Marcus Webb had seen some impressive attempts at intimidation in his 32 years. Boot camp sergeants, angry bears, his grandmother when he forgot to call on her birthday. But Commander Veritok of the Galactic Survival Academy was really committing to the bit. The massive reptilian predator stood at least 9 feet tall, covered in scales that looked like they could deflect small arms fire, with teeth that belonged in a museum exhibit labeled, "Why Our Ancestors Stayed in the Trees." His eyes were the color of a sunrise on a planet where sunrises meant something was about to eat you. When he spoke, it sounded like gravel being crushed in a blender made of other, angrier gravel. "Welcome to Creche 9, Veritok snarled, his breath forming clouds in the negative 40-degree air. 40% of you will not complete this course. 20% will require significant medical intervention, and all of you will learn the most fundamental truth of survival in this galaxy." He paused for dramatic effect. Marcus wondered if they taught that pause in instructor school, or if it came naturally to predator species. No one survives alone. The other recruits, a collection of aliens from across the galactic community, shuddered appropriately. There was Clicking, an insectoid whose name was actually an untranslatable series of mandible sounds, but who'd given up and accepted the English approximation. He was currently clicking so anxiously he sounded like a tap dancer having a nervous breakdown. Skyward, an avian species with iridescent feathers and an ego that could be seen from orbit, puffed up his chest in what Marcus assumed was determination. And Gloop, a gelatinous blob creature who communicated through color changes and was currently a nervous shade of mauve. "Cooperation is not optional," Veritok continued, pacing in front of them like a general addressing troops before a suicide mission. "It is the only reason any species has survived long enough to reach the stars. Alone, you are prey. Together, you are a pack. This is the way of nature. This is the law of survival." Marcus raised his hand. Veritok's eyes narrowed into slits that could cut glass. "Yes, human? Is there a bathroom nearby, or are we doing the authentic survival experience right from the start?" Several recruits made sounds that the translation software rendered as shocked gasps. Skyward's feathers actually ruffled in offense. Clicking stopped clicking, which somehow seemed worse. Veritok's jaw muscles tensed in a way that suggested he was reconsidering his opposition to eating students. "The facilities are behind Barracks 3. Try not to freeze to death on the way." "Appreciate it," Marcus said cheerfully, and trudged off through the snow. When he returned, Veritok had moved on to explaining the course structure. 6 weeks of progressively harder challenges, each designed to test their ability to work as a cohesive unit. Shelter building, food procurement, navigation, emergency response, all graded on cooperation, efficiency, and survival rate. "Your individual skills mean nothing here," Veritok said, staring directly at Marcus. "I have trained warriors from the Krenth Empire, who are born with combat instincts. I have trained the Hive Collective, who cooperate on a genetic level. I have trained species you cannot pronounce who have survived ice ages, asteroid strikes, and dimensional rifts. And do you know what they all learned? That you really like making speeches?" Marcus offered. Clicking made a sound like suppressed laughter. Gloop briefly flashed yellow, which the translation software unhelpfully labeled as amused concern. Veritok's smile showed every single one of his predatory teeth. "They learned humility, human. I look forward to teaching you the same lesson." Marcus just nodded politely. He'd been through worse. Probably. Well, maybe not worse, but definitely colder. That winter in Montana had been rough. The first challenge came at dawn, which on Creche 9 meant the temperature rose to a balmy negative 30 degrees. Veritok gathered them at the edge of a ravine that looked like the planet had been angry, and decided to take it out on the local geography. "Your first test," Veritok announced, clearly enjoying himself. "Cross this ravine as a team within 2 hours. You have basic climbing gear, rope, and each other. Failure means you run the exercise again tomorrow, at night, when it's colder." The alien recruits immediately sprang into action with impressive coordination. The Krenth warriors started assessing anchor points. A group of smaller species began calculating weight distribution. skyward flew across to scout the far side. Even clicking, despite his nervousness, started clicking out what sounded like a complex mathematical equation. Web, Veritok said, his tone suggesting this was going to be fun for exactly one of them. You're with Group 3. Clicking, skyward, and gloop. Show me this human cooperation I've heard so much about. Group 3 gathered for a planning session. Skyward immediately declared himself team leader based on his ability to fly and his natural superiority in aerial matters. Clicking wanted to build a mathematical model of the crossing before proceeding. Gloop turned a shade of orange that apparently meant, I have concerns but lack the appendages to express them. Marcus looked at the ravine, then at the fallen tree about 30 yards to the left. Hey guys, he said, interrupting Skyward's explanation of his 15-step plan. What if we just use that tree? All three aliens turned to look at the massive dead trunk that had fallen across the ravine at some point, creating a natural bridge. That's not proper procedure, Skyward said, ruffling his feathers. It's not in the mathematical model, Clicking added, clicking nervously. Gloop turned brown, which meant either I agree with them or I need to find a bathroom. The translation software wasn't clear. Right, Marcus said. Well, I'm going to use the tree. You guys do the procedure. He walked over to the fallen trunk, tested its stability with a few cautious steps, and then crossed the ravine in about 5 minutes. Once on the other side, he waved. Group 3 stared at him, then at each other, then at the elaborate rope system they'd started constructing. Skyward flew across, muttering about respect for protocol. Clicking scuttled across the tree bridge, clicking what sounded like mathematical objections. Gloop sort of oozed across, turning a confused shade of purple. They finished in 7 minutes total. Meanwhile, the other groups were still organizing their crossing strategies. The Krenth warriors had built an impressive rope bridge, but were having a democratic debate about crossing order. Another group had formed a living chain but couldn't agree on the optimal linking method. Veritok stood with his arms crossed, watching Marcus with an expression that suggested he was mentally writing an entire dissertation titled, Why I Hate This Human. By the time all groups finished, Group 3's time was the fastest by a significant margin. During the debrief, Veritok managed to make fastest completion sound like a war crime. Speed without proper procedure is just recklessness, he growled. Webb, your approach showed a complete disregard for team cohesion and proper survival methodology. In a real survival situation, this individualistic approach would get you killed. In a real survival situation, wouldn't the goal be to not die quickly? Marcus asked. Because we didn't die, and we did it quickly. Seems like a win. Clicking made that suppressed laughter sound again. Veritok's eye twitched. Tomorrow, the commander said slowly, we build shelters. Let's see how your shortcuts work when the ice storms hit. That night in the barracks, Marcus could hear the other recruits discussing proper team formation strategies. Skyward was giving a lecture on the importance of respecting established procedures. Someone was crying softly, probably about the cold. Marcus wrapped himself in his thermal sleeping bag, set a mental alarm for 0600, and went to sleep. It was going to be a long 6 weeks. Day 2 brought the promised ice storm and the shelter building challenge. Veritok explained the rules with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a funeral. Build a shelter that could withstand the incoming storm, which would hit in 4 hours and last for 12. Temperatures would drop to -60. Wind speeds would reach 80 miles per hour. Survival was mandatory. Style points were optional. The alien teams immediately began construction on elaborate shared structures. The Krenth warriors built something that looked like a military bunker crossed with an igloo. The Hive Collective created an interconnected network of pods that would have impressed an architect. Skyward's team constructed a towering shelter with multiple levels and what appeared to be a weather vane on top, because of course they did. Marcus gathered materials and built a simple A-frame shelter, packed the walls with snow for insulation, created a small fire pit with proper ventilation, and was done in 90 minutes. Then he crawled inside and took a nap. When the storm hit, it hit hard. The wind screamed like it had personal grievances against everyone present. The temperature plummeted so fast, Marcus could literally watch the moisture in the air crystallize. His shelter shook but held, the packed snow walls providing excellent insulation, the fire keeping the interior at a survivable temperature. Outside, he could hear the aliens in their megastructures coordinating heating shifts, rotating wind watch duties, and conducting structural integrity assessments every 30 minutes. It sounded exhausting. Marcus added another log to his fire and went back to sleep. When the storm passed and Veritok did his inspection rounds, he found Marcus eating a breakfast of rehydrated eggs and instant coffee. "You slept through it," Veritok said. "It wasn't a question." "Seemed like the logical thing to do," Marcus replied. "Shelter was solid, fire was stable, nothing I could do about the storm. Why waste energy staying awake?" Veritok looked at the simple shelter, then at the elaborate alien constructions that had required constant maintenance throughout the night. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. "Functional," he finally managed. "Barely." Day 3 was food procurement, which Marcus had been looking forward to. Veritok led them to a forest zone that looked like nature had read a horror novel and decided to use it as inspiration. "You have 6 hours to secure enough food for your team," Veritok announced. "Hunting, gathering, trapping, any method is acceptable. Work together. Watch each other's backs. Remember, alone, you are prey." The alien teams organized hunting parties with military precision: scouts, flankers, backup positions, communication protocols. Skyward's team had a 15-minute briefing just on hand signals. The Krenth warriors did weapons checks that could have been a religious ceremony. Marcus found some sturdy branches, fashioned 3 basic snare traps, set them near what looked like game trails, gathered some edible-looking fungi that matched his survival guide, and then started a fire to cook on. 2 hours later, he had 3 rabbit-equivalent creatures roasting over the flames and was working on a pot of mushroom soup. Clicking found him there, having abandoned his team's elaborate hunting formation to investigate the smell of cooking food. "How did you?" Clicking clicked, his mandibles working in confusion. "You just the traps. They're so simple." "Yep," Marcus agreed, turning one of the roasting animals. "Rabbits aren't smart. You put food where they walk into the trap. Pretty straightforward." "But your team, the coordination, the backup plans. Don't have a team here," Marcus pointed out. "They're all busy with the hunting party organization, which is great, very impressive, a lot of planning involved, but the rabbits don't care about planning." Clicking's entire body seemed to vibrate with thought. He turned a shade that Marcus's translation software labeled as contemplative curiosity. Meanwhile, Skyward's hunting party returned with 1 small bird after 6 hours of coordinated effort. They looked exhausted and slightly hypothermic. Gloop had turned a defeated shade of gray. During the evening debrief, Veritok paced back and forth like a lawyer who'd just realized his case was falling apart. Webb's approach, while technically successful, demonstrates a dangerous pattern of individualistic behavior. In a real survival situation, this lone wolf mentality leads to isolation, vulnerability, and death. In a real survival situation, wouldn't having dinner be the priority? Marcus asked. Skyward ruffled his feathers aggressively. "Some of us respect the natural order of cooperative survival. Some of us were hungry," Marcus replied. Gloop flashed yellow again. Clicking made that clicking sound that might have been laughter, or might have been his species' version of existential crisis. Vratok's expression suggested he was mentally updating his curriculum to include a section on why humans are problematic. By the end of week 3, Vratok had reached his limit. Marcus could tell because the commander's eye had developed a permanent twitch, and his speeches about cooperation had taken on the desperate tone of a philosophy professor watching his life's work crumble. "Final examination," Vratok announced, his voice carrying across the assembled recruits. 48 hours in the deep zone. This is the harshest environment on Kresh 9. Temperature extremes, predator activity, limited resources. This is where I separate survivors from corpses. He pulled up a holographic display showing team assignments. Marcus found himself grouped with Clicking, Skyward, and a large armored alien named Thunk, who communicated entirely through head gestures. "These teams are final," Veritok said, staring directly at Marcus. "No modifications, no solo attempts. You survive together or you fail together. This is non-negotiable." Marcus raised his hand. "What if I just go alone?" The entire assembly went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause to hear Veritok's response. The commander approached Marcus slowly, each step deliberate, his massive form casting a shadow that could have its own area code. When he spoke, his voice was low and filled with the kind of certainty that came from decades of breaking recruits. "You want to go alone, human? Let me explain something to you. I have trained thousands of students from hundreds of species across this galaxy. I have watched the strongest warriors crumble. I have seen the most intelligent strategists fail. I have buried recruits who thought they were special, who thought they knew better, who thought they could survive against nature itself through individual skill alone." He leaned closer, his breath visible in the cold air. "No individual survives against nature. Not the Krynth with their combat instincts, not the hive with their genetic coordination, not the phase beings who can walk through walls, and certainly not humans, regardless of what your pride tells you. Cooperation is not a suggestion. It is the only reason any species has survived long enough to leave their home world." Marcus considered this. "Okay, but counterpoint. What about all the humans who lived alone in the wilderness for years? We've got hermits, solo explorers, that guy who spent 27 years alone in the woods because he didn't like people. We've got monks who take vows of silence and live in caves. We've got lighthouse keepers, fire lookouts, research scientists in Antarctica spending months with minimal contact. We're actually really good at the alone thing." Veritok's jaw clenched. "Those are aberrations. Exceptions that prove the rule. Your species may have a few individuals who can tolerate isolation, but that doesn't mean they thrive. It doesn't mean they're truly surviving against nature. They're surviving despite their isolation, not because of it." "Pretty sure they're surviving because they learned skills and applied them," Marcus said. "The being alone part was just, a side effect of being somewhere alone." "You will work with your team," Veritok said with absolute finality. "That is an order." The deep zone was exactly as advertised. Harsh, cold, filled with things that wanted to eat you, and featuring weather that changed moods faster than a teenager. Marcus's assigned team lasted approximately 6 hours before the cracks showed. Skyward insisted on establishing a leadership hierarchy first. Clicking wanted to mathematically model their shelter options. Thunk gestured that they should build a fort. Marcus suggested they maybe start with fire and shelter before the organizational meeting. This suggestion was met with unanimous alien disapproval. By hour 8, the team had fractured into 3 separate factions, each insisting that Marcus join their particular approach. Skyward demanded he acknowledge proper leadership structure. Clicking wanted him to appreciate the mathematical elegance of planned survival. Thunk just gestured emphatically. Marcus looked at all 3 of them, then at the darkening sky, then at the falling temperature reading on his wrist device. "Right," he said. "Good luck with that." He walked away to find a suitable shelter location. Behind him, he could hear Skyward squawking about protocol violations and clicking frantically about team cohesion statistics. Thunk gestured what was probably the alien equivalent of, "Are you kidding me right now?" Marcus found a good spot against a rock formation that would block the wind, started building a shelter, and got to work on survival. Alone. Just the way Veritok said was impossible. 12 hours into the exercise, Marcus had a functioning shelter, a fire, a water collection system, and was working on his 3rd meal. The shelter wasn't fancy, just a lean-to with proper insulation, but it kept the heat in and the cold out. The fire was small and efficient, positioned to maximize warmth while minimizing fuel consumption. Everything was practical, simple, and most importantly, working. He heard clicking sounds before he saw clicking emerge from the darkness, looking like an insectoid who'd had a very long day of questioning his life choices. "My team fell apart," Clicking said, his mandibles drooping. Skyward declared himself supreme leader and flew off to prove he could solo it. Thunk gestured that we were all incompetent and walked away. I've been wandering for 3 hours. Fire's warm, Marcus offered. Got some food if you're hungry. Clicking settled near the flames, his exoskeleton reflecting the firelight. How do you do it? Just survive like this? Without coordination, without backup, without the safety of a group? Marcus added another log to the fire. It's not that humans don't value cooperation. We do. But we approach it differently. See, your species, most alien species from what I can tell, you cooperate because you have to. It's built into your biology, your social structure. You're stronger together because individually, you're vulnerable. And humans aren't vulnerable. Oh, we're incredibly vulnerable. Fragile bodies, no natural weapons, pretty much everything on Earth wanted to eat us for most of our evolution. But we didn't respond by becoming dependent on the group for survival. We responded by making sure each individual could survive first, then cooperate from a position of strength. Clicking's antennae perked up with interest. Explain. Think about it, Marcus said, checking his water collection. Human kids are taught individual skills from childhood: fire starting, shelter building, food procurement, basic medicine. We learn to be self-sufficient first. Then when we cooperate, it's because we choose to, not because we'll die without it. We're not cooperating out of weakness. We're cooperating because two capable individuals working together are more effective than two dependent individuals trying to survive. He gestured at the shelter. This isn't special. This is basic human survival training. Any competent human could do this, which means when humans form teams, every member brings this baseline capability. We don't need each other to survive. We choose to work together to thrive. Clicking processed this, his color shifting through several shades. So Vratak's philosophy is backwards. For humans, yeah. He's teaching cooperation as a survival necessity. But for us, cooperation is a force multiplier, not a life requirement. The difference matters. A distant roar echoed through the deep zone, something large and probably hungry. Clicking tensed, but Marcus just added more wood to the fire. Predators generally avoided fire. It was one of those universal constants that worked across planets. Over the next several hours, they heard various commotions in the distance. Skyward's voice carried at one point, squawking about emergency situations requiring immediate assistance. Thunk's heavy footsteps suggested he was running from something. Other teams could be heard coordinating rescue operations for their members. Marcus and Clicking just maintained the shelter, kept the fire going, and worked on their food supplies. When dawn broke on the second day, the emergency sirens started. Not the end of exercise sirens, but actual emergency alerts. Marcus grabbed his gear and headed toward the source of the commotion, Clicking following close behind. They found chaos. An avalanche had swept through the central valley, separating teams and creating genuine danger. Vratak and the safety monitors were scrambling to coordinate rescue efforts. Alien students were trapped, injured, or simply lost in the confusion. Marcus assessed the situation with the casual efficiency of someone who'd dealt with worse. He'd been through avalanche training in Colorado. The principles were the same regardless of planet. Clicking, you see that group trapped behind the snow pile? Yes. I'm going to dig a channel to them. I need you to mark a clear path back to base camp using those glow sticks in my pack. Think you can handle that? I can do that. They worked together, Marcus using his survival tools to carefully excavate while Clicking marked the escape route. When they broke through, 3 alien students stumbled out, hypothermic but alive. They repeated the process twice more, pulling out students that the official rescue teams hadn't reached yet. Not because Marcus was better at rescue operations, but because he'd already been in the area and had the immediate tools available. By the time the official safety teams established coordination, Marcus had helped extract 7 students, stabilize 2 injuries, and set up a temporary warming station using his shelter supplies. Vratak found him there, surrounded by grateful aliens, looking like a commander who just had his entire worldview challenged by empirical evidence. You were supposed to learn cooperation, Vratak said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. I did cooperate, Marcus pointed out. Clicking and I worked together. We just didn't need a committee meeting to decide how. Skyward landed nearby, his feathers ruffled and covered in snow. He saved my life, the avian admitted grudgingly. I had declared independence from the team structure and promptly got trapped under ice. Webb pulled me out. Gloop oozed over, flashing a bright gold color. According to Clicking's translation, gold meant profound respect and possible worship. Vratok looked at the rescued students, then at Marcus, then at his carefully constructed curriculum that was falling apart faster than his team structures. Debrief in 1 hour, he finally said. Everyone who can walk, report to base camp. As the commander walked away, Marcus could have sworn he heard the sound of an entire pedagogical philosophy crumbling into dust. The debrief room was warm, which was a nice change from literally everything else on Creche 9. Vratok stood at the front, looking like a general who'd won the battle but lost the war. The assembled students, mostly recovered from the deep zone disaster, waited with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for verdict announcements. Webb, Vratok said finally, you passed the exercise, successfully extracted multiple students, demonstrated survival capability, and maintained operational effectiveness throughout the crisis. Thanks, Marcus said. However, Vratok continued, his voice carrying that lecturing tone that suggested he wasn't done, your methodology remains fundamentally flawed. You operated outside established team structures, ignored proper cooperative protocols, and demonstrated the exact individualistic approach that I have spent my career warning against. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Commander, with respect, I think you're missing the point. The room went silent. Several aliens made sounds that the translation software labeled as, "Oh no, he didn't." Explain, Vratok said, his voice dangerously quiet. Your philosophy is that cooperation is mandatory for survival, that individuals are weak and only groups are strong, that no one survives alone. But that's not actually true, is it? What's true is that your species, most species in the galaxy, evolved in environments where cooperation was the optimal survival strategy. So you built your entire civilization around that principle. Marcus stood up, warming to the topic. But humans evolved differently. We evolved in an environment where we needed to be individually capable first, not because we're better, not because we're special, but because that's what Earth demanded. So we learned to make fire alone, build shelter alone, hunt alone, survive alone. And then once we had those individual capabilities, we chose to cooperate. That's the same thing, Skyward interjected. Cooperation is cooperation. It's not though, Marcus said. When you cooperate out of necessity, you're dependent. When you cooperate out of choice, you're enhanced. Your teams need every member to survive. Human teams want every member to thrive. There's a fundamental difference. He looked directly at Vratok. You teach that no one survives alone as if it's a universal law. But it's not. It's just the law for species who never learned to survive individually first. Humans don't survive alone because we're antisocial. We survive alone because we're prepared to. And that preparation makes our cooperation more effective, not less. Clicking clicked excitedly. That's why human teams are so effective in crisis situations. Every member is a complete survival unit. There's no single point of failure. Exactly, Marcus said. When my team fell apart in the deep zone, I didn't panic because I didn't need them to survive. I had the skills to handle it alone. And when the avalanche hit, I could help others because I wasn't dependent on others helping me first. Individual capability enabled cooperative effectiveness. Vratok stood there, processing this. His entire career had been built on one philosophy, and a human with too much confidence and not enough respect for authority was dismantling it with logic. So you're saying my teaching methodology is wrong, Vratok said slowly. I'm saying it's incomplete, Marcus corrected. You're teaching cooperation as a survival necessity, which works great for species who need that. But you should maybe also teach individual capability as a foundation for cooperation. Make every student capable of surviving alone first, then teach them how to work together. That way, when teams fall apart, which they sometimes do, people don't die. Gloop flashed through several colors rapidly, which Clicking translated as, mind blown, require processing time. Skyward ruffled his feathers thoughtfully. I suppose there is logic to individual preparedness enhancing group capability. Vratok walked to the window, looking out at the frozen wasteland of Creche 9. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its aggressive edge. I have trained thousands of students. I have built my entire curriculum on cooperative survival. And a human just explained to me that I've been teaching it backwards. Not backwards, Marcus said. Just incomplete. Cooperation is vital, absolutely. But so is individual capability. They're not opposites. They're complementary. The commander turned back to face the room. How would you teach it? Marcus blinked. Sorry? If you were to design a curriculum combining individual capability with cooperative enhancement, how would you structure it? Oh, I'm not qualified for that. I failed out of human survival instructor school. The entire room stared at him. You what? Vratok demanded. Yeah, they said I was too social, too focused on group dynamics. Apparently, I'm considered the cooperative one among human survival instructors. They wanted someone who could really lean into the solo independence thing, and I kept organizing group exercises and team-building activities. Irony is fun like that. Clicking's clicking sounded like laughter. Gloop flashed yellow. Even Skyward made a sound that might have been amused appreciation. Vuratok's expression cycled through several emotions before settling on something that might have been respect, might have been frustration, or might have been the alien equivalent of, I need a vacation. Guest lecture, he finally said. Next semester. Human Survival Philosophy. You'll teach a module on individual capability as a foundation for cooperation, standard instructor pay, full access to facilities. Appreciate the offer, Marcus said, but I've got plans. There's this volcanic moon in the Theta system, supposed to have excellent solo hiking trails. Thought I'd check it out. Solo hiking, Vratok repeated flatly. On an active volcanic moon. Yep, should be fun. That's insane. That's Tuesday, Marcus corrected. Besides, if I run into trouble, I'll just cooperate with whatever local life forms are around. After all, cooperation is the foundation of survival. He said it with such complete sincerity that it took Vratok a moment to realize he was being mocked. By the time the commander's expression shifted to indignation, Marcus was already heading for the door. Oh, one more thing, Marcus called back. That whole no one survives alone philosophy? It's not wrong. It's just not complete. The real lesson is that the best survivors know how to be alone when they need to be, and together when they choose to be. Maybe add that to next year's curriculum. He left the room to the sound of Clicking's excited chattering about thesis revisions, Gloop's golden appreciation, and Skyward's grudging admission that humans might have a point about something. Vratok stood there, looking at his carefully organized notes on cooperative survival, and slowly began rewriting his entire teaching philosophy. In the hallway, Marcus pulled out his communicator and sent a message to his brother back on Earth. Finished survival school, apparently teaching aliens about individualism now. Galaxy is weird. How's Earth? The response came back quickly. Boring without you. Try not to die on the volcano moon. No promises. Marcus typed back, grinning. After all, surviving alone was just another Tuesday. But surviving with style? That took real skill. And Marcus Webb had plenty of both.